Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to a new video on the Arabic Fluency channel. In this video, I want to discuss a shubha, an allegation that has been going around on the internet. Certain people have been claiming that the Quran has been plagiarized from the poetry of Imru al-Qays. And Imru al-Qays, as you know, is a pre-Islamic poet. So, what is the truth behind this claim? Let's have a look.
ومن ينفق الساعات في جمع ماله مخافة فقر فالذي فعل الفقر
وإذا ظلمت فإن ظلمي باسل مر مذاقته كطعم العلقم.
ألم تعلمي أني إذا الضيف نابني وعز القرى أقري السديف المسرهدا.
So these are the lines in question. These are some of the lines attributed to Imru al-Qays, which they claim the Quran has been plagiarized from. And there are some other versions of this as well, but this will give you an idea. يتمنى المرء في الصيف الشتاء حتى إذا جاء الشتاء أنكره فهو لا يرضى بحال واحد قتل الإنسان ما أكفره اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر من غزال صاد قلبي ونفر إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها, and so on. So as you can see, some of these lines are present in the Quran. We even have entire ayat in this poetry. Because the Quran in chapter 80 verse 17 says قُتِلَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا أَكْفَرَهُ. Chapter 54 verse 1 اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. And we all know Surah Al-Zalzala إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها. So what is going on here? Has the Quran been taken from some of the poetry of Imru al-Qays? Well, I have some news for you. This is not the poetry of Imru al-Qays as they claim, and this can be proven without any doubt whatsoever, inshallah. First of all, if you simply look at the meanings of these lines, it is clear this is not from Imru al-Qays, because it says اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. It is actually talking about the day of judgment. When the Quran says اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر, it means the hour or the day of judgment has drawn near and the moon has been split. And the splitting of the moon is a miracle of the Prophet ﷺ. So how could Imru al-Qays, who lived before the time of Islam, talk about this? He did not believe in the day of judgment. The Arabs did not believe in the day of judgment. In fact, this was one of their main issues with the message of Islam. They denied the hereafter, the day of reckoning. And even the other lines, they talk explicitly about the day of judgment. تقوم الأنام على رسلها ليوم الحساب ترى حالها. The creation will stand along with the messengers for the day of reckoning, and they will see their condition. This is not good poetry in any way. The standard of this poetry is actually not on the same level as the rest of the poetry of Imru al-Qays. So anyone who understands Arabic poetry, who has experience with it, can tell right away that this is not poetry of Imru al-Qays. And secondly, you can go on the internet, go to a bookstore and get a copy of the Diwan of Imru al-Qays. The Diwan is a compilation of poetry. So the Diwan of Imru al-Qays has all the poetry attributed to him. And you can look at any Diwan from any publisher, any version of the Diwan of Imru al-Qays, as long as it is a reputed, established publisher. And you're not going to find these lines there in his entire Diwan. You can also look in the books of adab, Arabic literature. You will not find these lines attributed to Imru al-Qays. So what is the basis for this shubha, for this allegation? Where does it come from? Now, there are certain books, for example, Fayd al-Qadir, Sharh al-Jami' al-Saghir, Sharh al-Jami' al-Saghir, by Imam al-Manawi. Now, this is not a book of Arabic poetry, but rather a book of hadith. This is an explanation of a hadith. And in this book, Imam al-Manawi mentions these lines and attributes it to Imru al-Qays, but he does not mention any source, nor does he present any sanad. So he just mentions this. Imam al-Manawi, by the way, died in 1030 Hijrah. So this is 1000 years after the Prophet ﷺ, much more after Imru al-Qays. So this is not close to the source. This is just a book mentioning these lines and attributing it to Imru al-Qays. But how could this happen? Why would a scholar of Islam make a mistake such as this? You have to understand that if you look at the way that Arabic poetry has been preserved, we don't have manuscripts. We don't have a manuscript with the signature of Imru al-Qays to say this is his poetry. How was Arabic poetry preserved and transmitted? It was transmitted orally. People would memorize these poems and convey it to others. And this is how it came down to us. And the main sources of pre-Islamic poetry that we have were certain people in the time of Islam. They were narrators of Arabic poetry. Such a person was called a Rawiya. A Rawiya was a person who memorized a large amount of poetry and conveyed it to the people. So we have narrators and transmitters like this who narrated all this poetry, the poetry of Imru al-Qays, Antara, Labid, and so on, and people compiled it into books. But what happened during this is that a lot of poetry became falsely attributed to the poet because these people compiled from different sources. And someone could have just come up and said, this is a poetry of Imru al-Qays, and some of them could have accepted this. Also, some of these transmitters, by their own admission, used to manufacture poetry and insert it into the poems of the poets they transmitted. So clearly, the preservation of Arabic poetry is not solid. A lot of false attributions are present, and this is what has happened here. So if you look at this critically, it's very, very clear that this poetry has been taken from the Quran and not the other way around. And this is a baseless allegation and nothing but a shubha. And I want to end with a bit of advice for my brothers and sisters. You have to understand that these people who bring forward these allegations, their intention is not to have a honest discussion. They are simply trying to sow the seeds of doubt in the mind of the believer. For this, they will lie, they will, present information inaccurately, they will use all kinds of tricks. And once you go and study and verify the claims, it becomes very clear, as we can see in this situation. So the best advice I can give you is just to ignore these kinds of allegations and claims, because you should not be wasting your time with these things. Anyway, this allegation was floating around on the internet, and I wanted to give a small contribution to dispelling these lies and allegations about the Quran. Jazakumullah khairan.